we are going to go through a series of lectures regarding this course known as Health Database Organization and Analysis. This course is coordinated by me. My name is Dr. Noah Chiwanuka from the School of Public Health in the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics. The goal of this course is to equip students with practical hands-on skills on exploring a secondary or pre-existing database, understand the variables in the data, be able to formulate a research question, and develop a conceptual framework after literature review, and assemble an analytic database or a dataset for analysis that will answer the formulated question, and then conduct action analysis to yield the results with regard to the question that was formulated. Please remember that this course is dealing with pre-existing data, what we call secondary data analysis, and specifically designed for secondary data analysis of health outcomes. You are living in a time when there is a lot of data available from research, various kinds of research on health that can actually be used for secondary data analysis. All you need to know is where the data are, who to contact to get the appropriate permissions, and then you use the skills gained in this class to actually be able to conduct data analysis. This course requires certain competences to have before you can enjoy it or go through it smoothly. One of the competences, you should have taken advanced, not advanced, I beg your pardon, you should have taken applied biostatistics level 2. And level 2 is where we go through the practical conduct of analysis, especially linear and logistic regression. You should also be conversant with the Stata, or at least any other analytic program, whereby what you are going to go through, you can convert it to other analytic program to be able to get the results. In this particular demonstration, we are going to be using Stata, and you are going to be using the Uganda Demographic and Health Survey data for the year 2010-2011. At the time of recording this series, the 2015-2016 data survey is already done, but the data are not yet publicly accessible. So the principles you are going to learn from here can actually be applied to any data set, including the 2015-2016, or any research data set that you could be having that may not necessarily be demographic and health survey. Specifically, the competences you will learn include exploration of a data set, formulation of research questions, and searching the variables that will answer that question, development of a conceptual framework. I will not talk about literature review a lot because that is covered in scientific writing and in the research methods. And then we will see how to assemble an analytic database or a data set for analysis, and how to go through the various stages of exploring the data set. We will revise certain competences, basically to do with the manipulation and dealing with the variables, as well as reviewing linear regression and logistic regression. This particular data set does not allow us to go through survival analysis, but maybe in the future or towards the end of these sessions, we may actually have a session on survival analysis with a different data set for some of you who may want to learn those competences as well. So we are going to start with how the course is evaluated. The course is evaluated by making certain submissions various submissions. The first is a conceptual framework, and that constitutes 10 marks. Then a data analysis plan, a draft results section, which includes introduction, background. We skip the methods because this is a secondary data. And then we have the other section next to background is results, the tabular and the figure results, and then the narrative, and of course the discussion. And we also submit a do file to show how you analyze the data. And if you are interested, you could also submit the log file, but the log file will not be graded. Then you will develop a short presentation about 5 to 7 slides, at most 10, and which indicate what you have done, right from the exploration of the data set, formulation of a research question, and analyzing the data to yield the results that you yielded. So that is about the introduction of the course. Before we get much into the analysis and exploration of the data set, let us review certain concepts that are very pertinent to this course and whose competences you actually need before you can do any secondary data analysis. First, before you use a pre-existing data set to analyze and answer a question, there are certain things you need to know. One, you should be confident and sure that that data set contains all the variables that you need to answer that question. Otherwise, if it doesn't contain the variables to answer the question, then it is not useful enough. Two, you should be sure that you have a question that can be answered from the data set. And the two may sound the same, but they are not exactly the same, and I will explain. First, you look at you develop your interest in the topic that you want to analyze. For example, if you want to analyze contraception, family planning use, contraception, or diarrhea, or vaccination, immunization, maybe for children, maybe for pregnant women, maybe attendance of antenatal, maybe something to do with sanitation, something to do with the sexually transmitted infections. Whatever it is, you got to develop, first and foremost, have a theme. A theme is the broad idea. I'm going to work on contraception. That's broad. Yeah? And now, from the theme, you develop a specific topic. Because contraception, for example, sexually transmitted diseases, HIV, sanitation, these are broad areas. And you cannot efficiently study every facet of each of the broad areas. So now, after you've seen that area, the theme, you have a broad area, then you narrow down to a specific topic. If you go back to contraception, the topic may be modern contraception. That automatically rules out all these non-modern methods. And it goes modern contraception. So theme, contraception. Topic, modern contraception. Then you narrow down further from the topic to the specific area, what we call area of focus. You have a theme, you have a topic, now you go to area of focus. And in this example, the area of focus may be hormonal contraception. And again, to revisit this, theme, contraception or family planning. Topic, modern contraception. Area of focus, hormonal methods. And then from there, you formulate a question. So you have your theme, you have your topic, you have your area of focus, then you formulate a question. Usually, by the time you are looking for a secondary data set for use, you already have the area of focus and maybe the question that just need to be refined. A question or questions that need to be refined. So in this case, once you have the area of focus, then the choice of the question depends on what you want the scientific world and the population in general to know. And that depends on your knowledge of the subject. If you are not very knowledgeable with that subject, I advise you to first do a literature review and find out, use the most current papers that have been published and the reports that have been written by these big non-research bodies like WHO, like DHS, we are looking at here. It could be PEPFAR, it could be UNICEF, those bodies that are not necessarily research, but have a lot of, do a lot of health work, including programming. So when you review the current publications and reports, one of the questions may be how current is current. When we say current, we refer to the past 12 months. Knowledge in science can get quickly outdated. So anything beyond the current the past 12 months may not really be referred to as recent or new information. Now, how do you do the literature search? You can go to Google and use Google Scholar, or you can go to PubMed online and type in your area of focus, modern hormonal contraception, Africa, for example, hormonal contraception, Sub-Saharan Africa, hormonal contraception, Uganda. And the more you narrow down, for example, from Africa to Sub-Saharan Africa to Uganda, the fewer the references you are going to get. So it is better if you want to do a study, if you want to research, to use the Uganda Demographic and Health Survey, it's better when you are doing literature review and search, you start with Sub-Saharan Africa. So get the information about your area of focus on Sub-Saharan Africa. Of course, the studies published about Uganda will also be part of Sub-Saharan Africa. Then you review this literature, and you review this literature with goals. And these are the specific goals for reviewing literature. Number one, you want to know what is the current state of affairs regarding the area of focus. Because in research, we do not want to reinvent the wheel. Anything that has been done is not worthy, is no longer news, is not worth doing unless there is a justified reason for doing it. We are looking for consistency, we are looking for tiebreaker, we are looking for differences in population. Otherwise, if it's already done, it is not good to just do for the sake of doing. So, point number one for literature review, update yourself with the current status. Point number two of doing a literature review in the case of this course is to find out what has been done, what has not been done, and why it has not been done. And that can be summarized as the gaps in the current literature. Point number one was status regarding that subject, current status. Point number two is gaps. What gaps do we have? It is among those gaps that you actually choose which one you want to address. There is always a temptation of people thinking that they can address all the gaps. And please, I advise you not to fall into that temptation. Even if you review literature and find 10 gaps in the current knowledge, please choose one, at most two, that your study or your analysis will address. You are not going to solve all the world's problems in one research study or analysis. And the focus is very important for achievement. So point number three, what you should do when you are reviewing literature and why you should review literature is to find out how people in the same field have been addressing the questions regarding that field. And I will now summarize these points of literature review and get into more in detail on literature review. We review literature to update ourselves about the current status on the topic or the subject we are going to study, to find out the gaps in the current knowledge up to the time we are planning our study, and 3, to see the methodology that other people have used, and see what we can piggyback on, or what we can copy and try to replicate in the methodology, or where we can change in our methodology and be different from the rest of the people. Okay, so that is about literature review. When you are reviewing literature, please be systematic. Usually, people have different ways of stating what they have reviewed. My advice is to use a tabular form, and I will now want to focus onto the table form of literature review. So when you are reviewing literature, it's good to have a table. It may be an Excel table, it may be a Word table, but it's good to have a table. And the table has various columns. So one, you may have the authors, for example, authors. And authors here takes in also the year in which it was published. You may also include the journal, but this is not necessarily important. And for authors, usually you can do the first author. Then you want to know which study population the study was done. You want to know the study design that was used. Study design, you want to know, and here study population refers to the characteristics of the population, for example, children, and also please the sample size. Sample size here, and also the country. For example, if this was a study in children that was done in Uganda among children under 5, and this study was done by, let's say, this study was done by Okurut et al. And other people, then we would say study done in 1,200 under 5-year children in Uganda. You could even say Kampala, Soroti, and Otuke districts. That is a good summary. Then the design, community randomized trial, for example. You put the design. Then from there, other variables to note. We have already studied design and all these. Then we need to find out the major indicator variable. Okay? What is the major indicator variable? Okay? And of course, we need to know the results, and we need to know the limitations. What were the limitations? So once you were systematic about that, you can easily know, okay, the major indicator variable could be, for example, could be incidence of malaria by RDT, rapid diagnostic test. And what were the results? We could say those who used the NETS insecticide-treated nets had lower incidence than their counterparts. Then we find out the limitations of the study. So when you review a paper or a report in a systematic way, and you are noting information, it makes life easier for you as you go along. So once you have collected that information, and depending on the number of papers that you review or reports, your summary of the literature review may be this short or maybe this long. So the next thing then you do is to bring like with like. For example, you may say, okay, I have reviewed literature, I have reviewed 20 or 30 papers. Out of those 30 papers, there are 4 randomized clinical trials. There are 12 observational cohort studies. There are 10 cross-sectional studies. So now what you need to do is to bring like with like. So you now organize and say, okay, the randomized clinical trials. So you put those together. Then you put the cohort studies together. Then you put the cross-sectional studies together. Or you could organize by design. You could organize by country and say, okay, Sub-Saharan Africa versus Asia versus Europe versus US. And that is quite important, organized, because once you have organized them in different categories, then you summarize the findings regarding the studies in their different category. For example, you may come out and say, randomized clinical trials indicate that, the summary of the randomized clinical trials. Observational cohort studies showed that. Cross-sectional studies show that. Then instead of having a voluminous literature review, you can actually have a brief introduction which summarizes them either by design or by study preparation or by area where research was done. Then afterwards, you now expound and derive into the studies that you feel the reader should get more information about. By the way, even the summary can also include the findings. You can, for example, say randomized clinical trial indicate that use of mosquito nets decreases malaria incidence by 30 to 60%. Why? Because when you put them together, you discover that the one that had the lowest benefit was 30%, the one that had the highest was 60%. So now you summarize those, okay? Then you summarize another set and another set. So if you are going to do, for example, if you are going to conduct analysis in a cross-sectional study like a UDHS, then you may choose amongst the studies in that category which ones you are going to give more detail about, and usually that choice is also not from the blue. It is also based on rationale. If you are going to analyze UDHS, Uganda Demographic and Health Survey, and which is a cross-sectional survey, and you are going you have your cross-sectional, observational, and other study design summarized. It would make a sense to expound more on the cross-sectional studies that are more particular to Uganda. If they are not the ones that were conducted in Uganda, those ones you should give more details and say study done by so and so in this area of Uganda in this year found this and this. It is embedded in the summary that you gave before, but now you are giving more details about it so that when you do your analysis from UDHS in Uganda, then you should be able to provide enough platform to your reader or reviewer regarding the results that you've come out with and your literature review. I think that that is enough for that. But also, when you are reviewing literature, remember it is also connected to something else, to other things that are important. Literature review is also connected to the conceptual framework. And I now want to go back to the board to illustrate this. So this is an area, the conceptual framework is an area that is not well, in my view, it's an area that is not taken seriously, or more seriously than it has to, than it deserves. So the thing is, the conceptual framework is a show of the interrelationships between your study outcome and the various factors associated with it. And if we have our outcome, for example, in the middle, our outcome that we are going to study, as we review literature, we find out the different factors that people discovered that are associated with the outcome. Some may be factors that lead to the outcome. Some may be factors that actually come from your outcome. And so when you are reviewing literature, it is also good to have a sample conceptual framework. As you are reading and reviewing your literature, you discover that, oh, this outcome of mine is increased by age of household head. It is also residence of the child, for example. Are they staying in urban area or are they staying in a rural area? You may discover that schooling status, whether it is in or out of school. Then you may discover that exposure to smoke, and this is cooking smoke, for example. Cooking smoke, but it could also be cigarette smoking. So as you collect this information, as you do a literature review, also use this opportunity to correct this information. And for each that you are reviewing, find out, does it have a direct effect on the outcome, or does it have an indirect effect? If it has an indirect effect, the question is, through what other factor? Through what other factor? In other words, if age of the household head increases the occurrence or affects the occurrence of the outcome, does it affect it directly, or age of the household works through the income of that household head to affect your study outcome? So it is important that you don't miss this information when you are doing literature review, because this information, as you can tell, it helps you to develop the conceptual framework. But on top of that, it is important for the analysis, because it now shows you which factors you are going to look for, and once you are convinced that those factors are important, then you are going to look for the variables that contain information on those factors in the secondary data set. So it is really important. Please recall that the conceptual framework has two components. It has the schematic component and the narrative component. The schematic and the narrative. Now, the schematic is where you have groups of factors organized in different diagrams, and then all these are related to the outcome. It is a schema, okay? This could be like this. Some of the arrows may be two-way, others may even be one-way but dotted because they are not very strong associations, and some may actually be linked. So this is just a schema. It shows you the factors that are here are related to the outcome, but in a bidirectional way. Yeah? So even this factor here can also lead to them, just as they can also lead to it. This arrow shows you that the factors here can lead to the outcome directly, but they can also lead to it through another variable, another set of factors. And indeed, you could have another set of factors which only work through other factor, and they don't have a direct link with the outcome. Now, these factors are always grouped. Please you group them. You can say socio-demographic factors. You can put, for example, wealth, status factors. They could be community factors, different, but each of these should have a subtitle that shows the grouping of the factors. And then, once you have grouped them, please bullet the various factors under there so that your reviewer can know exactly these are the major, this is the major topic here, but these are the factors that you have studied or you have found out in the literature review. Now, there is an area, a gray area, regarding the schematic conceptual framework. Some people think that you should only include the factors that you are going to study in the schematic and indeed even the narrative. Others think that you should include all the factors you've found which indicate that you have a comprehensive knowledge about the subject. And I belong to the school of thought of the latter. My advice to you, put all the factors you are going to study and the ones you are not going to study in there. It shows that you are broadly knowledgeable about the subject. Then, provide some indicator to the reviewer or reader which ones you are actually going to study. I could put so many factors here, and instead the ones I'm going to study, I put them in italics. So whichever is in italics is the ones that I'm going to do what? To study. It indicates that I know this factor is also related to this outcome, associated with it. Even this one. But I'm only going to study this and this and this and this. So this becomes a comprehensive conceptual framework than just indicating only the ones you are going to study. Now, from the schematic, now we go to the narrative. The narrative is now the writings. You are going to go and write about the factors that you are going to study. The narrative principally refers to only those you are going to study, those factors that you are going to study. If you either bolded them or you put them in italics, then when you come to the narrative, these are the factors you are going to talk about. So you will again start with the theme, social demographics. And now, under social demographics, for example, you say age. Now, it is not enough to just state them or bullet them. Here, you give the relationship between age and the outcome. So, most studies show that as age increases, the occurrence of the outcome decreases. So, in the narrative, you should explain how those bulleted factors in the scheme interact with the outcome, or what the relationship between those factors and the outcome is. Let me give you an example about HIV. I may have so many factors, non-use of condoms, total number of partners in the past year, new partners in the past year, having sex with high-risk people, all these kinds of things. But I do need to explain, if I'm going to study those whichever factor I'm going to study, I do need to explain it. If my study is about incidence of HIV, I need to explain that having sex without a condom with somebody who is not your usual partner, or somebody whom their status you don't know, increases the risk of getting HIV. Being a male and you are not circumcised also increases the what? The risk. But I should be able also to explain that being promiscuous increases the risk. But being faithful to one partner decreases the risk, whether you are using condoms or what, or not. Testing HIV status with a partner regularly and getting to know their status is also. So I should be able to explain how those factors are associated with the outcome. And that comes in the narrative. In the narrative part of the conceptual framework, we don't just state the factors again. We have to explain how the factors what is the relationship is between each of those factors and the outcome. When you explain that, it also has other advantages. Assuming here we explain that increasing age results into decreasing outcome, and that is our narrative. It also serves another purpose. The other purpose it serves is now we know from here that the relationship between age and the outcome is inverse. When the age increases, the outcome does what? Decreases. So already in the narrative, we are getting some information about the data analysis plan. Data analysis plan, we know that for sure we have to look at age. But in addition to that, we're also getting information on the expected results. We expect that as the age of a subject increases or a participant, the occurrence of the outcome should come what? Down. So when we do this bivariate analysis, we are not just doing a fishing expedition. We do a bivariate analysis, and we know that from our literature review, from our conceptual framework, increase in age is associated with decrease in the outcome. So as we do the bivariate, we try to look out, are our results pointing in the right expected direction? So it is, you can see the advantage of the conceptual framework. A detailed conceptual framework actually answers 3 questions, or helps in 3 areas. 1, gives the broad knowledge about the subject. 2, gives you the expected outcomes of the results, although they may turn out different, but at least you have some knowledge to expect. And 3, it begins to give you some information about the data analysis. And indeed, you can formulate your data analysis plan from a detailed literature review and conceptual framework. So we are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we are going to look at the data analysis plan. Thank you.